cool.
Welcome to Third Floor Views, a projection of Chesapeake family life, where we talk about health, education, and living with kids. I'm your host, Janet Jefferson. Today, we're talking about the local DC art scene, specifically murals. Joining us is Jason Bowers, founder and curator of Jab Arts, founder of DC Mural Tours, and an integral part of Powwow DC, a mural festival. Jason, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi, how are you?
To our viewers and listeners, this episode is pre-recorded, but feel free to reach out and leave any comments or questions that you may have, and we will get back to you. Jason, let's jump right in. So first, if you could just tell us a little bit about Jab and about DC Mural Tours.
Absolutely. So Jab is my small business that I basically run as a curator and a project manager for art events in DC. And DC Mural Tour is exactly that. It is a mural tour that I also run and operate here in DC. I have been working in the art scene here full time for about 4 years, but off and on, and as a side hustle for nearly a decade. And so I created Jab as basically a way to help bring more art to more people. So be it that I'm hired by a client to help curate a pop-up art show, or I'm creating a murals on the side of a new hotel, or just something like somebody says, hey, I want to put up a mural. Can you help me find a wall? So it's all the logistics, all the background to getting more art to more people. Yeah.
I imagine there's a lot of pieces that most people don't think about that go into that process. It's not as simple as just walking up to a wall and slapping some paint on.
Right.
So I imagine there's quite a lot of logistics, which I think would surprise a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk a little bit more about DC Mural Tours. Could you tell us just about the tour and who you would recommend the tour for? You know, is it for locals or for out of town guests, or kids, families, your in-laws who you want to get out of the house?
So it's for everybody. It's all of those. Although I will say the tour is about 2 hours long. So if you've got someone under 4, bring a stroller.
Gotcha.
So DC Mural Tour is a company I started, and it was based on a number of mural tours that I took when I would travel abroad or to other cities. I've done these amazing mural tours in cities that, like you would expect, New York, Berlin, London, Los Angeles. And I really wanted to have some option like that here in DC. Now, it coincides with the fact that we've got this amazing mural festival called Powwow DC, which I'm wearing the hat for. And Powwow DC was started by Kelly Tolles, who is an exceptional artist in DC. And he, along with a couple of other folks, including myself, founded the festival 6 years ago. And it is based in the Noma neighborhood next to Union Market and near Union Station. And as part of that, we would give tours, free tours, and I'll come back to that. We always do free tours during the festival. But the combination of wanting to provide this to folks year round, as well as wanting to have like another side hustle, side business, helped me to spark this idea of like, I want to do these mural tours. Mural tours should be from somebody who has the insight into the murals, that has actually met the artist or knows the stories behind the artist, or can tell a great story or a funny story about the piece, can show you where a mural used to be if it doesn't exist anymore. And because of my work with Powwow, I have that experience and that knowledge of the murals all throughout Noma and Union Market. So that was how it was born. It is for everybody. I get just as many local visitors and guests as I do folks visiting from out of town. I have had probably the majority would be in that in between. A lot of folks from like Northern Virginia and Eastern Maryland, the Baltimore region, Annapolis, Philly, Richmond, folks that are doing like a weekend trip up to DC. But I also this morning I did a tour, and I had 3 folks from Denver and 2 from West Virginia. And they were all probably in their 60s to 70s. So, and today was a hot day, so it was a slow tour, but it was a fantastic one. And like I said, it is perfect for kids. It's perfect for groups. I've done tours with school children that are getting interested in doing an art project, from junior high up. The only thing I recommend again is your four-legged children or kids under four. Probably plan on bringing a stroller, or you're going to be carrying them for a little bit because the tour is 2 hours long.
How long is it in terms of mileage?
So it's actually a very short distance. Noma is a tiny neighborhood. And I think I mapped it out once. It's maybe 1.5 miles the entire tour. That's all we walk. And the start and the finish are like 0.7 miles from each other.
Mm.
We start in the southern part of Noma near Union Station, and we finish at Union Market, which is a fantastic place to eat and drink as well. So it's quite covers a very small footprint, and that's just because we have so many murals in that neighborhood.
Mm.
But in months like August and this past July, or maybe let's say February or March, the weather plays a part. So I always send an email out to everybody the day before saying, hey, it's going to be hot tomorrow. Be prepared, or it looks like it might rain. Bring some umbrellas. We always want to make sure guests are comfortable. And also there's we stop all the time. I think today with my group, we had 2 coffee breaks in the middle of the tour. So
that's important. Gotta stay hydrated and caffeinated. Do the murals change? Does the tour change?
Yeah, so actually the tour does change, not dramatically, but the tour changes every year simply because every year we have our festival, which brings in roughly 15 to 20 new murals. We also, because of the state of development in DC, lose a lot of murals. In 2020, we lost 12 murals in that small area I described.
Wow.
Yeah, 8 of them belong to 2 buildings. We had murals wrapped around a building, and then they tore the whole thing down. But we lost 12 murals last year, so that forced me to have to like reconfigure how many can I get the most murals in the smallest amount of walking. And there are some areas that we don't touch on the tour, but I definitely point them out to folks. Like, hey, if you went 10 more minutes up the street this way, there's this amazing park that has murals all around it. But if next year more and more murals are up that way, I might reconfigure the tour. So I always let folks know this will be different. If you come back next year, it's going to look totally different. You'll see some of your favorites. You'll see a bunch of new ones. But whenever you're on the tour, and whenever you see street art in general, you should appreciate it when you see it, because it's here today, gone tomorrow.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I'm not sure everyone thinks about that. You see this art and it's so big and it's so present and it feels like it will last forever. But there is this sort of aspect of it being ephemeral and
I mean,
which also makes it special.
It is. And that's, no matter where, and that's why Instagram is such a valuable tool for artists, because it helps them to preserve their artwork. But like even on my mural tour website, there's already a couple of pictures on there that those murals no longer exist. And it's like, oh, I guess, so I'm updating my website all the time. Or people will be like, hey, I saw that one of the hummingbird. Where's it at? I'm like, oh, that's not on the tour anymore, but I'll tell you, it's 10 minutes that way.
Yeah. So what drew you to DC Murals? How did you end up founding DC Mural Tours and JAB?
Yeah. So like many people, I came to Washington, D.C. To work for the federal government. I was working for the Peace Corps, which I had been a volunteer. Then I worked in the New York office and brought me to D.C. And I had a 15-year career in the federal government. Now, the whole time I was a huge aficionado and a fan of street art, but art in general. But DC is a transient city. And once I realized it's going to be my home, I wanted to dig deeper into real DC. Not just the after work federal employee, happy hours, and not just going to the mall or some, annual beer festival, but like real DC. And I started to get to know a lot of the artists better. I started to volunteer my time working with them, showing up to more and more galleries, exploring kind of the underground. There's so many small and independent galleries in the city. It's amazing, and almost every neighborhood really has something like that, and you won't even realize that, Mount Pleasant has this amazing, small, but amazing gallery. And this guy, Jason, runs it. He puts on shows every month. And so it just was like, just making sure you show up and you're there for the artists and you're meeting those folks. And eventually my interest and passion in the arts and my growing disinterest in working in a 9-to-5 job kind of led to this merge of like, okay, my Rolodex is big enough now. My interest is here. I'm going to take my skills as a trainer, as a manager from the federal government, and I'm going to apply them to the art world. And that's how JAB was born.
Hmm.
You know, looking at like, even though it was started a few years ago, look at 2019, we put on a show called Umbrella, working with No Kings Collective, who are huge artists in the city. Probably the top street artists in DC. We took over a school that had left. They had been given a ton of money to go open up new schools, and they were leaving this one particular location. We took over an entire block that had been a former school and a few stores, and put on essentially what was like a mini like Art Basel type show. We had 12 different rooms, each one curated by a different artist, plus like party rooms, plus a dance room. We had light exhibits. We had, of course, filled with like hanging art, but we also did performance art. Had a huge beer garden, and the whole thing is set in like what still felt like it was an elementary school. Very cool experience. And basically curating all the curators, managing that entire project from soup to nuts was like a 3-month project.
Hmm.
And it was amazing. And it was because of those ties that I've been making with the artists in town, because of being able to like learn the ropes of like how the DC art scene works. Because it's like everything, there's politics in it. And then how to like market that and advertise it. And we had 11,000 visitors in 3 days, and we sold $100,000 in art.
Wow.
And all of that went to the curator and the artist, not to us. So it was a huge, and it's like from that point on, I was like, I'm sold. This is what I want to do. And that's continued to this day. I curated a brand new hotel at the beginning in 2020, the Hotel Xena in Thomas Circle, right where kind of 14th Street meets downtown. And it was all DC and Baltimore-based artists, all female artists. And we did a huge mural on the outside, a couple murals inside. We had about 25 portraits painted, and we did a ton of like fabric art too. And this is what's really cool about working in the arts. Like I focus on street art, but there are so many styles of art out there. I don't know fabric artists, I didn't. And now this world of like yarn art and felt art is so amazing. But again, it's everywhere. You just have to start to peel away the layers. Where can I find it? I maybe need to go to Northern Virginia to go see this gallery. Maybe I need to head up to Baltimore or to Annapolis or just to like some little town in between those to find these nuggets of art. Anyway, so I'm rambling, but that was kind of the creation of Jab. And then at the same time with Powwow happening, and I feel like just a natural ability to like tell stories, the idea of the Mural Tours was born, and I started that in 2018. And that's been gangbusters. It's been amazing. So all of these things are happening simultaneously. The one thing I tell folks, if they're ever thinking about it, like if you're getting tired of the 9 to 5, well, get ready to work 7 to midnight. But you're going to have 5 or 6 different jobs instead of one job, and it's no days like the next day, which is and no week is like the next week. So which is the most amazing thing.
Yeah, you're never bored.
No, never bored. Sometimes I'm not even tired because I've been up 3 days in a row. Can't afford to be bored or tired.
So you mentioned a couple times about some fantastic, not only festivals, but events or little galleries, and you've talked about the real DC or the true DC. How would you recommend that people find these things? Right. So where should they look for what events to go to, or what galleries are doing some really fun cutting edge stuff?
That's a great question. The great place to start is going to be social media. As I mentioned earlier, Instagram, but to a lesser extent, Facebook and Snapchat are the tools that artists use the most, and what small businesses also use a lot. And so it's all about digging into a social media. So let's just say you follow me, and then I will post my friend's event coming up, and then, oh, cool, let me click on that. Now let me follow them. And then they're going to post about the art show they're having, and they're going to list the 5 artists that are going to be there. Cool. Let me check on them and follow them. And it takes a little bit of time, but eventually you can curate your social media platform so that you're seeing what's happening everywhere. Like I'm going to go back to No Kings Collective. One of the founders, Peter Chang, on his personal Instagram account, he lists events all the time. And it's because he's hyping his friends.
Right.
And so like I look at his stuff both because I'm friends with him, but because I want to know what's going on tonight, what's going on this weekend.
Right, right.
From there, there's a few platforms. DCist does like a kind of things happening this week or what to do this weekend. And they're really in touch with the art scene. So DCist will kind of tap into not only street art stuff, but they'll tap into museum openings. They'll talk about the Kennedy Center as much as they'll talk about Powwow.
Hmm.
And so like, you subscribe to those blogs, you get them. They usually show up on like Wednesday about what's happening this weekend. I think Thrillist does one. Brightest Young Things used to do one, but they're no longer doing that capacity. But find a couple of local blogs that might talk about the art scene.
Hmm.
And then from there, it's kind of like it's just expanding. It's one of those things. It's like a snowball. It starts out really slow, but eventually, once I knew the guy that ran that gallery in Mount Pleasant, then all of a sudden it opened me up to this new gallery in Brookland.
Hmm.
And these are two neighborhoods that I very rarely go to. And if I do, it's probably at night to have drinks or dinner.
Right.
Now it's like, oh, okay, now I'm going to go check out Brookland during the day and find this gallery. And then those folks are going to link me to another new gallery. And it goes on and on and on.
Right. So it's easy to grow your artist network.
Yeah. So social media is a great place to start. And again, for Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, Twitter, they all work. And then a couple of local blogs.
Hmm.
And then of course it's sites like this too.
Hmm.
Actually, getting the word out there. You had that piece on the theater company in Baltimore.
Hmm.
I would have never known about them, but then I saw that piece and now I'm interested in that. And then I go down that lane of like finding out more about them and the scene in Baltimore, et cetera. So
Definitely. So what do you think makes DC's art scene unique?
So DC is native Washingtonians are very proud of being native Washingtonians, and that's awesome, as they should be. And there's a lot of like, buy local, shop local, support Black Washingtonians, very specifically. All of those are amazing. And of course, without getting too deep into it, like the history and the culture of the Black experience in DC itself is super unique, and you find that across music and art and performance art and literature and everything. Also, though, DC is a huge transient city. I mean, for generations, this isn't new. For generations, people have moved to DC to work for the federal government or to have a job working on the Hill or whatever it is. And they'll stay for 2 to 20 years. But that means you've brought in people from everywhere. There are, El Salvadorian artists and Lao artists and, next to a Nigerian American artist. And these folks are often coming into not just DC, but the DMV area. How many times have you heard the largest population of Mongolians outside of Mongolia is in Northern Virginia, and Ethiopians, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So there's just a huge melting pot of cultures, as well as how many times have you heard everybody from the Midwest eventually moves to DC? So it's cultures internationally and cultures even within our country. And so that has just created this melting pot of experiences and styles, and it translates to all the art forms. It translates to our food and drinking culture. And how many awesome restaurants are popping up all the time that are like, this is the new Filipino place. You got to check it out, right? And then who's doing the murals inside that new Filipino place? Guess what? It's a Filipino artist. And it's just like, that's what I love about DC. My buddy Henley, he goes by Golden Rabbit Silent Monkey. He is a Lao artist, born and raised in Northern Virginia, but in a huge Lao community. There's like 4 Lao restaurants in DC now, and he's done murals in all of them. And it's like, cool. It's like they're reconnecting or connecting the culture from the food to the art on the wall. And that to me is super awesome. Now, again, that is on top of also the native Washingtonian culture and the Black culture in the city. So all of those make a very unique story that I think is really only found in places like DC.
Yeah, I can see that. It's because it is such an international city, and that does bring so much, especially when you're talking about art in different perspectives. I think it's really valuable and like nowhere else in the world.
Yeah, I mean, so a quick example, like when I do my mural tours in Noma and Union Market, those are relatively young neighborhoods and neighborhoods that are just transforming like crazy. So a lot of our art is like, it's street art for street art's sake. It's not political. It's beautiful pictures, beautiful words. But then you go to U Street, and so many of the murals on U Street are really capturing the culture and the history of that neighborhood or of your native Black Washingtonians, and then very specifically the music that was born and bred on U Street. So many amazing jazz music. There's probably 10 Duke Ellington murals on U Street, and because he was raised near there, raised on U Street. So it's awesome that you can like have a mural tour on U Street that is a completely different experience from the mural tour in Noma and Union Market, or on H Street, or Adams Morgan. So
yeah, absolutely. So I know that Northeast is a huge hub for murals, but you've already referenced multiple different neighborhoods with other murals. Do you when you're done your tour, do you point people in other directions in terms of where else that they can go? Or do you feel like there are other hot spots in DC where you can see a ton of street art in a really short area?
yeah. So we have a lot of art that is just spread like crazy. I mean, I talk to artists all the time. Like, hey, could you include my tour? It's only 7 blocks away, and I'm like, oh, 7 blocks is a lot already. Noma and Union Market has, in that Noma Union Market area, there's probably upwards of 40 murals in a
Wow.
less than 2 square mile radius, if you kind of expand where my tour is. And of course, with the bike trail going up and down the Metropolitan Branch Trail, tons of murals from Noma all the way to probably Fort Totten. The U Street area is your iconic, mural destination. Some amazing murals, and there's some ones that are just like art for art's sake, and then there's a ton of historic murals there too. 14th Street kind of branches off. If you're heading down 14th Street, Logan Circle area, they're starting to put more murals up. H Street has a few. They've lost a bunch due to development, but what's interesting now is the increase of murals indoors. So street art kind of moving inside. You're seeing it with new restaurants, new bars, and especially new apartment buildings. Everybody wants a mural inside. So I always encourage people, and maybe I don't know if I should be saying this publicly, I like to go take apartment tours. If I know there's murals inside that building, I will go and take an apartment tour just so I can go see that mural on the roof or that mural in the bike room. They usually figure out halfway through that this guy's not going to rent, but I'm like, no, please, I want to see the bicycle room and spend 5 minutes photographing this mural.
Right.
I'm glad that all my friends who are artists are getting paid to paint, but it's kind of tough to watch street art move indoors. So I recommend folks do a lot of window shopping. And if you're in a neighborhood like Union Market and you want to eat something, there's murals in all of those places. So go in and like have the full experience of getting some food, but check out that cool mural back there. Bathroom art in DC is amazing. I have a buddy named Nate who just did the hallways and the bathrooms for what's that place in Navy Yard, Albee, which is a phenomenal restaurant, and they just added all these cool murals in the hallways and the bathrooms. Okay, I could totally do that. Go in and have a meal and check out some art while I'm there. So the big ones are U Street, Noma, H Street, a little bit of Adams Morgan. Downtown Silver Spring, there's got about 4 or 5 really awesome murals as well, and you can do them all like right around the movie theater. And then really it's about like kind of peeping the indoors. Any new apartment building, any new restaurant's going to have some art on the walls, some art in the hallways, even in the bathrooms, and it's definitely worth checking out.
That's good advice. Can you talk just a little bit more about the Powwow Festival, when it's coming, and what people can expect?
Absolutely. So it's every year in the fall, and we have not announced the dates yet, but it's looking like September 8th through the 18th. The easiest thing to do, it's Powwow DC, and that's either .com or on Instagram. So one thing to note is that we're going to be going through a branding change in the near future. So you'll still be able to find everything by going to Powwow DC, but the name will be changing either this year or next year. I'm not sure yet exactly, but it is in September. It's 10 days long. We have a huge opening celebration, usually the first Saturday, whenever that falls in that cycle. And that'll be probably at Althea Tanner Park, which is near Eckington, Noma, or we might do it like in like a beer garden or something, but it's always free and open to the public. It's all ages. During the festival, we have all kinds of events, including free tours. We give a bunch of free tours during the events where you can actually come and meet the artists while they're painting.
Very cool.
So we encourage folks to come, multiple times. I say come like on day 3 or 4 to see the work started, and then come on like the second to last day to see it kind of being finished. So yeah, so mid-September, it's going to be in the Noma neighborhood again. We're going to have between 15 and 20 artists, probably again about 15 to 20 new murals coming up. Just check out powwowdc.com or on Instagram powwowdc. If the name change happens, you'll be redirected to it.
Mm,
The rebranding, I should say.
that sounds good. So I know one of the unique aspects of your tours is that you personally know the artists, both local and international. And part of that is from some of these powwow festivals. What is it like to be a mural artist in DC?
So, it's always a struggle. Um, it's also become a very, very popular art form. So it has opened a lot of doors to a ton of artists, and especially your non-traditional street artists. We
Mhm.
have a lot of classically trained oil painters, acrylic painters, canvas painters that are moving into street art, which is awesome. And even people like projectionists moving into street art. But it's a struggle. There's still a bit of a misconception. There's a lot of folks out there that will say, "Hey, I'm a small company or I'm a small business. Would you please paint a mural and I'll put it on my Instagram for you. I'll give you exposure." And one of the biggest jokes that we have in the industry is exposure is what you die from in the woods. It's not what you pay an artist. um, so again, one of the reasons why I think folks like myself are important is helping to kind of bridge the management, like from the client to the art, from the wall to the paint. It's like bridging that. And there's a lot of good folks out there that will shepherd and bring in Kelly Tolles, No Kings Collective. These guys, a Neocon, they've been in the game a long time, and they will. Sita, Michelle Love, always brings in young artists and apprentices them, stewards them, and
Mm,
helps them to understand the value of their work. Um, an interesting thing that's happened in the last few years is the people who own the walls are starting to realize that their walls are worth money.
hmm,
And so, especially with clients, so now you have to factor in. You might have to actually rent this wall. If you're Verizon or Target and you want a mural, you want a big mural in DC about whatever. Not only you have to pay the artist and pay the manager, you're also going to have to rent the wall for X number of dollars a month. So
hmm,
that's kind of the new thing that's happening, and I applaud it because a lot of times these walls are like small independent businesses. It's I own a liquor store, I own a little clothing store, and now I can get $1,000 a month or 500 a month just to rent my wall out for 6 months. Great. I did a project in the middle of the pandemic, and this was a little scary at first. But I had to fly to 8 cities in the fall.
hmm,
It was for a big client. It was a very cool project. It was PBS, and so working for PBS is amazing. I had to go to 8 cities to find walls in each of those cities. And my goal was it needed to be near downtown, but my goal was to try to find small businesses that had nice walls, but not the side of a Target, not the
hmm,
side of a Walmart.
mhm,
And in Minneapolis, for example, it came down to this guy that's been running a bar in the theater district of Minneapolis for like 20 years, or this like upstart bicycle company kind of on the outskirts of downtown.
hmm,
And I was like, that's great that those are the two finalists for this wall, because I know PBS is going to give them a little bit of money and they're going to get a cool piece of art for 6 months.
mhm,
So all that to be said is like there's a huge business behind it, and it's difficult if you're just the artist trying to manage and navigate all those things. The best thing any artist can do is just to hustle and to tag along and learn the ropes.
hmm,
I did it as a federal government employee on my weekends and my nights off. I tagged along. I learned how to run a pop-up art show. Same thing for these young artists. Hit up people on Instagram. Say it. Slide into their DMs if you need to, right? And
mhm.
go to events and meet folks and learn how the game is played. And you're going to find amazing teachers out there like Kelly and like Peter and like Sita, um, who again, those three, I see them all the time, bringing up and nurturing and kind of like apprenticing young artists.
Mm. That's really great advice for kids who want to become
Mhm.
artists. And I think that's something that it's such a hard space to break into. And then of course you've mentioned how financially it's a really hard space to be in as well. But I think that's some great advice to have a mentor, find a mentor and help them help these young students,
Yeah.
these young artists sort of shepherd them through the process. What about the other side of it? Maybe more from your perspective, what advice would you give to a kid who's interested in maybe not necessarily directly making art, but being part of it and supporting artists and in art curation?
Okay. I thought of something, so I want to go back to the last question real quick.
Yeah.
This might not be for your intro artist, but as you're starting to make a name for yourself, do not be afraid to merchandise things.
Hmm.
I know a lot of people that made some decent money selling stickers, t-shirts, bandanas. Actually, give me 1 second. My buddy Eric, he goes by E-Money, made a bandana, and I bought it and I wore it as my mask. And
That's awesome.
yeah, so it's very easy these days to merchandise. So make a hoodie, make stickers, do all of those things. It also gets your brand out there. On my side of things, the advice is almost the same. If you're interested, and I would love to, even if like, hey, look, I'm a person with my own career, but I would like to do a pop-up art show to help support my kids' school, and I want to do this next fall. Cool. Then go find an artist, go find a pop-up art show, and talk to the person running it, or at least get their information, because they'll be happy to talk to you after the show is over, right? And they'll be glad to tell you, like, here's how I got the space. Here's how I created the walls. Here's how I paid for the lighting. Did I get a sponsor or did this come out of my pocket? Here's how to even deal with like money breakdown. Oftentimes we try to do an event where we get sponsors, and that's how we get paid. That way we don't have to take any money from the artists. However, though, in the traditional sense, the gallerist does take a cut of the money. So how do you figure that out? And it really comes down to, you can look it up online and you're going to get a million different answers. Go to these events and meet the people that are behind them, and just ask for a little bit of time. Ask for a couple of emails. They'll give it to you. They hopefully will give it to you. And again, go to 3 or 4 of them, and or go on a slate. Go at the beginning, not at the end of the night. When it's slow. I was working with a young man, not a young man, but a guy who wanted to do an art project in Logan Circle. And he lives in that neighborhood, and he really is interested in doing this project to bring more art to Logan Circle. And I basically shepherded him and talked to him about, like, here's what you need to do to go through like the DC grant process to try to get the grant. And here's how to make like a slide deck to present what you're trying to do. And like, here's a bunch of names of artists that might be interested in working with you. And what he's created out of it is the student has become the teacher. Like, he's going to teach me stuff now. Pardon me. And we're in the middle. It's going to open in September. He had artists cover, those utility boxes you see on the corners of neighborhoods.
Yes.
Like 5 feet tall or whatever. He's having 25 of them, I think, wrapped in art, all up and down 14th, 15th, and 16th Street.
So cool.
Yeah, and it's this great project. And he's got the city involved. The mayor's going to be there for like the opening celebration. Like, he took it to another level, but he had this interest, didn't really know where to go, and he approached myself and my friend Sita, who's an artist and has worked with the city. Just like, hey, what are the first steps I need to do to get this ball rolling? And he's less than a month away from having the completion of his first big curated project.
That's incredible. And so much of it sounds like it's community building, it's networking, and really helping so many people out in a really fun, positive way. It sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah, in this case with this gentleman, and his company's Radical Empathy, by the way. So what I say, like 20 some artists were paid, and their art's going to be on display on 14th or 15th Street for the next few years. The neighborhood got a bunch of art to look at. They're going to have a big event that the mayor's even going to be at. So like it tackles like, the curation side, the artist side, the neighborhood side, the government side. Like, so many people are going to touch and feel and experience this. Just like in Noma, you can walk around now and see dozens of murals that didn't exist before 2016. And as that neighborhood changes rapidly, the murals are sticking with it and showing up and popping up, and you're losing some and gaining some. And it's so neat to see that, and how the art, especially outside street art, becomes a part of the culture and the neighborhood.
Yeah, I can see how it's sort of cyclical. The culture makes the art, but then the art sort of makes the culture, and that's this cycle of feeding into each other.
And something that DC does really well, a lot of cities do, but what DC does really well is try to include as many local artists as possible.
Mm,
So even
mhm,
for Powwow, for example, we make sure that 50% of our artists are local and
mm,
50 are nationwide or worldwide. When I was doing the Hotel Zena, and I said I was telling you we did a portrait gallery, all the artists were female artists from the DMV, Northern Virginia, DC, and a couple from Baltimore. And so DC is really good about saying, hey, let's not doesn't have to be 100% local, but let's
mhm,
try to include local artists as much as possible.
mhm, mhm. That's so important, giving back to the community.
Mhm.
Well, thank you so much, Jason Bowers of JAB and DC Mural Tours. And thank you to all of our viewers and listeners. Make sure that you do visit ChesapeakeFamily.com for local up-to-date information on home, health, and living for today's Maryland parent. This episode will be archived on ChesapeakeFamily.com in both video and podcast format. I'm Janet Jefferson with Chesapeake Family Life and Third Floor Views. Thanks so much.